You're working today and listening to a Bible preacher, and he was talking about the Beatitudes, and he read one section, chapter 5, verses 11 and 12. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Okay, so is this a new thing? This new guy comes on the scene? Jesus? You follow me? Now people, we're going to say all manner of evil against you for my sake. You're blessed. Look at verse 12. Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. They persecuted the prophets which were before you because they said all manner of evil against them falsely for Jesus' sake. Yeah, that's true. That is true. For Christ's sake. That's not a curse word that people say, for Christ's sake. They were persecuted. The prophets were persecuted. Anyway, the camera fell. Hopefully it won't fall again. So, that was Christ. That was Christ. That was with them. Always in the wilderness. And Jesus quoted scripture from the Old Testament about the stone that the builders rejected, that the religious people rejected, has become the head of the corner. They were rejecting God all along. The religious people that thought they were following God, that would tell you to follow them as they followed God, were rejecting him all along. It says in 1 Corinthians, let me go there real quick. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, in verse 4, and did all drink the same spiritual drink, for they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. So we know that Christ is God. Christ is God. People who say he's not God, Christ was there in the wilderness with Israel. They followed him physically. They didn't follow him spiritually. They rejected him spiritually. So we know that they rejected their God. And so the people he was talking to wasn't just the people that were physically there. There was obviously the people that would read this. People that would read and believe, because a lot of people there were Pharisees and people that believed in the Pharisees. And he was urging them not to follow after the Pharisees. He said, unless your righteousness exceed that of the Pharisees. So they would persecute you for his sake, for Christ's sake, for God's sake. For you who believe and trust in God, you will be persecuted by the religious. Not by the world. I mean, the world, sure, but that's a given. The world doesn't care about God. He's talking about religious people. The two groups he's talking about are the religious who trust in themselves and claim the name of God, and the people who put their trust in the name of God and know who he is. And those people, of which my wife and I are two, are persecuted by them. We're not going around complaining about it, because we live in a relatively free country where you won't be persecuted real bad like they were back then, where, let's face it, if he's an example of anything, he's an example of what can happen to us. He said, if they hate you, remember, they hated me first. They truly hate him. And they proved it. They killed him. So they'll want to kill you in a kind of context of separating you, shunning you, ignoring you, pretending like you don't exist. It's the same type of persecution. If they had more freedom, they would do what the Pharisees did. They would, because you're very threatening to them if you put your faith in God and you don't trust in any institutions of man. That's very threatening to the religious mind. It is. It used to threaten me when I was religious. Well, what do you mean you're saved and that's all there is to it? That can't be. You have to do this thing I tell you what to do. That's what you have to do to maintain your salvation. Do it and then maintain it according to this religious instruction that I believe in. Fortunately, I never got to the point where in my heart I would have been casting stones at people, but in a way I did. I was casting stones. I was persecuting them in my heart, because that's where it all really happens. And I want to do another study on that later about that, how you're comparing two people. Say a person that does a good thing and a person who does a bad thing, but they both have the bad thing in their heart. They both want to do the bad thing, but one decides to do the good thing. Which one is a sinner? Well, obviously, according to Jesus, they're both sinners, because he said, if you lust in your heart, if you hate in your heart, that's the breaking of the commandment. And he did that to show to us that we are all breaking the commandments. And it's him that we offend. It's him that we are against. So it's not about obedience. It's about trust. I mean, that's an obedience of sorts. It's the obedience of faith that Paul talks about. But anyway, I got to get back to work. I just want to share this real quick. That Jesus is your God, your one and only God. And when you put your trust in him, you will be persecuted. So expect it. He's always been there. He wasn't new on the scene. He was with Israel from the get-go. He was with Adam in the garden. And he's with us now, whether we acknowledge him or not. In Jesus' name.